He's been circling this block for 20 minutes, acting suspicious. Carolyn Grant's voice carried across her manicured lawn as she pointed at Dr. Elliot Dunn, who was simply trying to find parking after his hospital shift ended. The afternoon sun illuminated her red blouse as she spoke into her phone. Officer Harold Stone, already en route to investigate her complaint about the black man in scrubs who didn't belong near her exclusive community. Dr. Dunn stood beside his Honda, exhaustion weighing on his shoulders after performing 2 emergency surgeries, his orange surgical cap still visible in his car window. Stone arrived with lights flashing, stepping out with authority in his short-sleeved uniform, ready to interrogate the suspect. What none of them could predict was that Carolyn Grant's chronic heart condition would spike her blood pressure in exactly 3 hours, and the man she was having arrested would be her only chance at surviving the massive cardiac event that was already building in her arteries. Welcome to Frost Folktales. This is where we tell the stories of those who were underestimated, dismissed, and targeted, yet chose courage over silence. If these stories move you, subscribe and be part of a community that refuses to let them fade into the background. Dr. Elliot Dunn rubbed his tired eyes as he slowly drove down Magnolia Avenue for what felt like the 100th time. His green surgical scrubs were wrinkled from 14 hours at Metropolitan General Hospital, and his dark hands gripped the steering wheel with the careful precision of someone who had just finished saving 2 lives. The cardiac surgeon had received a text from his college friend Marcus inviting him over for dinner. But every parking space near the modest house seemed occupied. The irony wasn't lost on him that finding a place to park was proving more challenging than the complex valve replacement surgery he had completed just 2 hours earlier. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the well-maintained neighborhood, where perfectly trimmed hedges lined the sidewalks and luxury cars sat in pristine driveways. Dr. Dunn's Honda looked modest among the BMWs and Mercedes, but he had never been one to measure success by material possessions. His fulfillment came from the rhythm of a heart monitor returning to normal, from the relief in a family member's eyes when he delivered good news about their loved one's surgery. As he turned the corner again, hoping a space might have opened up, Dr. Dunn noticed a woman in a red blouse and designer jeans standing on her immaculate lawn. Carolyn Grant's manicured nails tapped against her hip as she watched his Honda with narrowed eyes. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail that seemed to stretch her features into a permanent expression of disapproval. She had been observing this black man in scrubs drive past her house repeatedly, and in her mind, his presence could only mean trouble. Carolyn pulled out her phone with the urgency of someone reporting a 5-alarm fire. Her voice took on the breathless quality reserved for dramatic emergencies as she dialed 911. "Yes, I need to report suspicious activity in the Magnolia Heights area. There's a black male who's been circling our block for at least 20 minutes. He keeps slowing down near houses, looking around like he's casing the neighborhood." The dispatcher's voice crackled through the phone, asking for more details. Carolyn's eyes never left Dr. Dunn's car as she continued her fabricated narrative. "He's driving a dark Honda, wearing what looks like hospital scrubs, but that's probably just a disguise. You know how they try to look legitimate. He's definitely up to something suspicious. This is a safe neighborhood, and we can't have people like that prowling around." Dr. Dunn finally spotted Marcus waving from his front porch and pulled over near the house. Relieved to have found his destination, he stepped out of his car, stretching muscles that had been tense for hours during delicate surgical procedures. His green scrubs bore the small stains that came with a profession where life and death decisions happened in sterile operating rooms under harsh fluorescent lights. He grabbed his phone to text Marcus that he had arrived, completely unaware that his simple search for parking had been transformed into a criminal investigation in Carolyn Grant's imagination. The sound of sirens cut through the peaceful afternoon air. Dr. Dunn looked up from his phone, mildly curious about what emergency might be unfolding in this quiet residential area. The irony that he had just left one emergency room only to encounter sirens in a suburban neighborhood struck him as oddly coincidental. He had no way of knowing that those sirens were racing toward him, carrying Officer Harold Stone and a predetermined narrative about suspicious black men who didn't belong in upscale neighborhoods. Officer Stone's patrol car rounded the corner with lights flashing, immediately spotting the Honda and the black man in scrubs standing beside it. Stone had been primed by the dispatcher's report about a suspicious person casing houses, and confirmation bias kicked in as he observed Dr. Dunn's presence. The officer was a 15-year veteran who had built his reputation on aggressive policing and quick assumptions. His short-sleeved uniform stretched across his stocky frame as he stepped out of the patrol car with the swagger of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. "Sir, I need you to step away from the vehicle and keep your hands visible," Stone commanded, his hand resting casually on his belt near his weapon. His voice carried the authoritative tone that had intimidated countless citizens over the years, regardless of whether they had committed any actual crimes. Dr. Dunn looked around in confusion, pointing to himself as if to confirm that the officer was addressing him. "I'm sorry, is there some kind of problem? I was just visiting a friend." His voice carried the educated cadence of someone who had spent years explaining complex medical procedures to worried families. The exhaustion from his hospital shift made his movements slower, more deliberate, as he tried to process why a police officer was treating him like a criminal. "We received reports about someone acting suspicious in this neighborhood. I'm going to need to see some identification," Stone demanded, stepping closer with the confident posture of someone who had never questioned his own authority. His eyes scanned Dr. Dunn from head to toe, taking in the scrubs with suspicion rather than recognition of a medical professional. Dr. Dunn reached slowly into his pocket, producing his hospital identification badge along with his driver's license. "I'm Dr. Elliot Dunn, cardiac surgeon at Metropolitan General Hospital. I was just looking for parking near my friend's house." He held out the credentials with the patient demeanor of someone accustomed to proving his qualifications, though usually in professional rather than confrontational settings. Stone barely glanced at the identification before shaking his head dismissively. "These could be fake. Anyone can get fake hospital badges printed up these days. What were you really doing driving around this neighborhood multiple times?" The question hit Dr. Dunn like a physical blow. He had spent the morning saving a construction worker's life after a heart attack, followed by an afternoon performing emergency surgery on a car accident victim. Now he stood on a public street being accused of criminal intent because he had been searching for legal parking. "Officer, I understand there might be some confusion, but I'm exactly who my identification says I am. I'm a surgeon, and I was simply looking for a place to park." Carolyn Grant had been watching the interaction from her lawn, and she decided the officer needed additional motivation to treat this situation with appropriate seriousness. She walked across her perfectly maintained grass, her designer jeans and red blouse making her look like she was heading to a country club rather than inserting herself into a police investigation. Her heels clicked against the sidewalk as she approached with the confidence of someone who had never been told that her opinion wasn't wanted or needed. "Officer, thank goodness you got here so quickly," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "This man has been circling our block for at least 30 minutes, slowing down near different houses like he was planning something. I've never seen him in this neighborhood before, and frankly, people like him don't usually live around here." Dr. Dunn's jaw tightened as he processed the implications of Carolyn's statement. The phrase "people like him" carried centuries of racist assumptions wrapped in seemingly polite language. He had encountered this type of coded discrimination throughout his medical career, from colleagues who questioned his surgical recommendations to patients who requested different doctors based solely on his appearance. But standing on a public street while being falsely accused of criminal behavior represented a new level of humiliation. "Ma'am, I appreciate your vigilance," Stone replied, his chest puffing up with the validation that his aggressive approach was justified by citizen complaints. "We can't be too careful these days. Sir, I'm going to need you to be more specific about which house you claim to be visiting." Before Dr. Dunn could respond, Marcus appeared from his front porch, having heard the commotion. But Stone held up his hand, cutting off any interruption to his investigation. The officer had already decided that this situation required his full authority, regardless of any explanations that might contradict the narrative he had constructed. Across the street, Mrs. Beatrice Jefferson stood at her window in her blue jacket, watching the scene unfold with growing concern. The 70-year-old retired teacher had witnessed enough injustice in her lifetime to recognize it when she saw it. Her weathered hands reached for her phone, instinctively understanding that documenting this interaction might prove crucial. She had lived through an era when black men could be accused of crime simply for existing in the wrong neighborhood, and she recognized that some things had not changed as much as people claimed. "I'm going to need you to turn around and place your hands on the vehicle so I can conduct a search," Stone commanded, his voice taking on the aggressive edge that preceded most of his arrests. "We've had reports of break-ins in this area, and your behavior matches the profile we're looking for." Dr. Dunn's heart rate increased, but not from the cardiovascular disease he spent his days treating. This was the elevated pulse that came with the realization that his medical degree, his years of training, his life dedicated to saving others, meant nothing in this moment. He was being reduced to a stereotype, a threat to be neutralized, rather than a professional to be respected. The afternoon sun continued to shine down on Magnolia Avenue as three very different worldviews collided in a confrontation that would test everything Dr. Dunn believed about justice, dignity, and the power of character over prejudice. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the pristine sidewalk as Officer Harold Stone placed his heavy hand on Dr. Elliot Dunn's shoulder, applying pressure that spoke of authority and aggression. The metallic surface of the Honda Civic felt warm against Dr. Elliot Dunn's palms as he was forced to lean forward, his green scrubs wrinkled from the long surgery he'd just completed. "I need you to spread your hands wider and keep them visible," Officer Harold Stone commanded, his short-sleeved uniform crisp despite the heat. His voice carried across the manicured lawns of Maple Ridge Estates, drawing curious faces to windows and front porches. Dr. Elliot Dunn complied with measured calm, though his jaw tightened with controlled frustration. "Officer, as I explained, I'm Dr. Elliot Dunn, cardiac surgeon at Metropolitan General Hospital. I just finished a 7-hour surgery, and I'm looking for parking near my colleague's house. My hospital identification is in my wallet if you'd like to verify." "Yeah, you mentioned that," Officer Harold Stone replied with dismissive skepticism. "But this ID could be fake. Anyone can print a badge these days. What I see is someone who doesn't belong in this neighborhood acting suspicious." The sound of footsteps on concrete drew their attention as neighbors began emerging from their homes. A middle-aged white man in khaki shorts and a polo shirt approached first, followed by a woman walking her small dog. Each new arrival brought whispered conversations and pointed stares. Carolyn Grant seized the growing audience as her moment to shine. Adjusting her red blouse and smoothing her designer jeans, she approached the gathering crowd with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. "Thank goodness Officer Stone responded so quickly," she announced, her voice projecting across the small crowd. "This man has been circling our block for over 20 minutes, clearly casing our homes. I've lived in Maple Ridge for 15 years. And I know suspicious behavior when I see it." Murmurs rippled through the assembled neighbors. Some nodded in agreement while others exchanged uncertain glances. The weight of their stares pressed against Dr. Elliot Dunn's shoulders as he remained positioned against his car. "Ma'am, I'm a cardiac surgeon," Dr. Elliot Dunn said, turning his head slightly to address the crowd while keeping his hands visible. "I was looking for parking, nothing more. I have identification that proves my profession and my reason for being in this area. Anyone can claim to be anything, Carolyn Grant countered smoothly. Officer Stone is protecting our community from people who don't belong here. We pay good money to live in a safe neighborhood. The implication in her words hung heavy in the air. Several neighbors shifted uncomfortably, while others nodded more vigorously in support. From across the street, a voice cut through the tension like a blade. "That's enough." Mrs. Beatrice Jefferson, wearing a blue jacket despite the warm weather, approached with the measured gait of someone who had witnessed injustice before and refused to stay silent. At 73 years old, Mrs. Beatrice Jefferson carried herself with dignity, earned through decades of standing up for what was right. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, and her dark eyes blazed with righteous anger. "I saw everything from my window," she declared, pointing to the modest house across from where the confrontation was taking place. "This young man was simply looking for parking. He never got out of his car, never approached any homes, never did anything suspicious. He's being harassed for the crime of existing while black." Officer Harold Stone's expression hardened. "Ma'am, I need you to step back and let me handle this situation. This is police business." "This is community business," Mrs. Beatrice Jefferson replied firmly. "And I'm part of this community. I've lived here for 22 years, and I know harassment when I see it." The crowd was growing larger now, with nearly a dozen neighbors gathered on the sidewalk. Some held cell phones, recording the encounter with varying degrees of discretion. The afternoon light cast sharp shadows between the perfectly maintained houses, creating a stark backdrop for the unfolding drama. "Mrs. Jefferson, with all due respect," Carolyn Grant interjected, "you weren't as close as I was. I had a clear view of his suspicious behavior. Officer Stone is just doing his job. His job is to serve and protect all citizens," Mrs. Beatrice Jefferson shot back, "not to harass innocent people based on unfounded accusations." Dr. Elliot Dunn felt his phone vibrating in his pocket, but Officer Harold Stone's position made it impossible to reach for it. The familiar ringtone of the hospital's emergency line sent a spike of anxiety through him. Someone needed medical attention, possibly urgently, but he was trapped in this absurd situation. "Officer, my phone is ringing," Dr. Elliot Dunn said calmly. "It's likely the hospital calling about an emergency. May I please answer it?" "No sudden movements," Officer Harold Stone replied curtly. "The phone can wait. People could die while you're playing these games," Dr. Elliot Dunn said, his professional composure beginning to show cracks of frustration. At that moment, a familiar voice called out from the edge of the crowd. "Dr. Dunn? What's going on here?" Nurse Gloria Mensah approached quickly, still wearing her green scrubs from their shift together. Her expression shifted from confusion to anger as she took in the scene, her colleague being treated like a criminal while neighbors watched and recorded. "Gloria," Dr. Elliot Dunn said with visible relief, "please tell Officer Stone who I am." Nurse Gloria Mensah addressed the officer directly, her voice professional but firm. "I'm Gloria Mensah, registered nurse at Metropolitan General Hospital. Dr. Dunn and I just finished surgery together 3 hours ago. He saved a 60-year-old man's life today with a complex cardiac procedure. He's one of the finest surgeons I've ever worked with." Officer Harold Stone's expression grew more suspicious rather than less. "How do I know you two aren't working together? Could be accomplices for all I know." The suggestion was so absurd that several neighbors actually gasped. Nurse Gloria Mensah stared at Officer Harold Stone in disbelief. "Accomplices to what exactly?" she demanded. "Looking for parking? Being black in a nice neighborhood? What crime do you think we're committing?" Carolyn Grant stepped forward again, unwilling to let the narrative slip away from her. "They could have planned this together. One person distracts while the other cases the area. It happens all the time." "That's ridiculous," Mrs. Beatrice Jefferson said sharply. "You're grasping at straws because you know you were wrong." The crowd was beginning to divide more clearly now. Some neighbors, particularly those who lived on Mrs. Beatrice Jefferson's side of the street, were expressing support for Dr. Elliot Dunn. Others, especially those closer to Carolyn Grant's circle, were nodding along with her version of events. Dr. Elliot Dunn's phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. The persistent sound added urgency to an already tense situation. "That's the emergency line," Dr. Elliot Dunn explained, his voice tight with controlled frustration. "Someone needs surgery. Every minute we waste here could cost a life." "Convenient story," Officer Harold Stone replied. "Stays exactly where you are." A young mother pushing a stroller approached the edge of the crowd, her expression troubled. "Excuse me," she said hesitantly, "but doesn't this seem a bit excessive? The man hasn't done anything wrong that I can see." "Thank you," Mrs. Beatrice Jefferson said gratefully. Finally, some common sense. But Carolyn Grant wasn't finished. "Easy to say when it's not your house being targeted," she replied to the young mother. "Those of us who've invested in this community have a right to protect it." "From what?" Nurse Gloria Mensah demanded. "From doctors who save lives? From people who work 16-hour days helping others?" The philosophical battle lines were drawn clearly now. On one side stood those who believed in justice, evidence, and human dignity. On the other stood those who prioritized suspicion, assumptions, and the maintenance of exclusive barriers. Dr. Elliot Dunn remained pressed against his car, a living symbol of competence and achievement being treated as a threat. His medical degree from Johns Hopkins, his years of residency, his hundreds of successful surgeries, his dedication to healing, none of it mattered in this moment. Only the color of his skin seemed relevant to those who had already judged him. "I'm recording this entire incident," announced a teenager from the back of the crowd, holding up his phone. "This is going straight to social media." "Good," Mrs. Beatrice Jefferson said approvingly. "People need to see how innocent citizens are treated." Officer Harold Stone's jaw tightened at the mention of recording. "Everyone needs to disperse and let me handle this situation professionally." "Is this professional?" Nurse Gloria Mensah challenged, gesturing toward Dr. Elliot Dunn's humiliating position. "Forcing a surgeon against a car for the crime of looking for parking?" The afternoon sun continued to beat down on the scene, creating an almost surreal quality to the confrontation. Here in this picture-perfect neighborhood, with its pristine lawns and expensive cars, a fundamental question about justice and human dignity was being played out in real time. Dr. Elliot Dunn's phone finally stopped ringing, leaving an ominous silence. Somewhere in the city, a patient might be fighting for their life, needing the skills that were currently being wasted on this sidewalk theater of prejudice and power. The crowd continued to grow, with new arrivals quickly choosing sides based on their own experiences, biases, and moral compasses. The afternoon that had started with Dr. Elliot Dunn saving a life in surgery was transforming into a public trial of his right to exist freely in society. As whispered conversations continued around them, Officer Harold Stone maintained his aggressive posture while Carolyn Grant basked in the attention her accusations had generated. The stage was set for an escalation that would test everyone's character and reveal the true nature of justice in their community. The afternoon sun cast harsh shadows across the pristine sidewalk as more neighbors gathered, their phones capturing every moment of Dr. Elliot Dunn's humiliation. The exhausted cardiac surgeon stood with his hands pressed against the Honda's warm hood, his green scrubs wrinkled from the long surgery he'd completed just hours earlier. Officer Harold Stone loomed behind him, his short-sleeved uniform stretched tight across his broad shoulders, one hand resting on his service weapon while he continued his aggressive interrogation. "I'm telling you, this ID looks suspicious," Officer Harold Stone declared, holding Dr. Elliot Dunn's hospital identification card up to the light. "These things are easy to fake. You could have printed this at any Kinko's." Carolyn Grant stood on her manicured lawn in her red blouse and designer jeans, Her arms crossed with satisfaction as she watched the scene unfold. The afternoon breeze barely stirred her perfectly styled blonde hair as she nodded approvingly at Officer Harold Stone's handling of the situation. Several neighbors had emerged from their expensive homes, some clearly uncomfortable with what they were witnessing, while others seemed to share Carolyn Grant's sense of vindication. Mrs. Beatrice Jefferson continued recording from her position near the sidewalk, her blue jacket bright against the afternoon sky. Her elderly hands held the phone steady, capturing every word and gesture as the confrontation escalated. Nurse Gloria Mensah stood nearby in her green scrubs, her face a mask of barely controlled anger as she watched her respected colleague being treated like a common criminal. The sound of screeching tires drew everyone's attention as a silver sedan pulled up behind Officer Harold Stone's patrol car. Dr. Richard Holloway stepped out quickly, his orange polo shirt and khakis a stark contrast to the tension-filled scene before him. As Chief of Cardiology at Metropolitan General Hospital, Dr. Richard Holloway had worked alongside Dr. Elliot Dunn for over 8 years, witnessing firsthand his colleagues' exceptional skill and unwavering dedication to saving lives. "What the hell is going on here?" Dr. Richard Holloway demanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making life and death decisions. He strode directly toward Officer Harold Stone, his face flushed with indignation. "Dr. Dunn, are you all right?" Officer Harold Stone turned to face this new arrival, his expression immediately defensive. "Sir, you need to step back. This is a police matter. We're investigating suspicious activity in this neighborhood." "Suspicious activity?" Dr. Richard Holloway's voice rose with disbelief. "This man is one of the finest cardiac surgeons in the state. He just finished saving 2 lives in emergency surgery this morning. Dr. Dunn, why are your hands on that car?" Dr. Elliot Dunn lifted his head slightly, his dignity intact despite the humiliating position. "Dr. Holloway, I was simply looking for parking when this officer decided I was acting suspiciously. I've shown him my hospital ID, but he claims it's fake." Dr. Richard Holloway's face darkened as he processed the situation. He reached into his wallet and pulled out his own hospital identification, along with a business card. "Officer, I'm Dr. Richard Holloway, Chief of Cardiology at Metropolitan General Hospital. This is Dr. Elliot Dunn, one of my senior attending physicians. I can personally vouch for his identity and his character. Now release him immediately." Officer Harold Stone examined Dr. Richard Holloway's credentials, but his jaw remained set stubbornly. "I appreciate your concern, sir, but I have authority in this situation. Multiple witnesses have reported suspicious behavior, and I need to complete my investigation." Carolyn Grant seized the moment to inject herself back into the confrontation. She stepped closer to the group, her red blouse catching the afternoon light, as she pointed an accusatory finger at both Dr. Elliot Dunn and Dr. Richard Holloway. "Officer Stone, I think we have a bigger problem here. Now his accomplices are showing up with fake credentials. They're obviously working together to case our neighborhood." The absurdity of the accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Dr. Richard Holloway stared at Carolyn Grant with undisguised amazement. "Ma'am, are you seriously suggesting that the chief of cardiology at a major hospital is involved in some kind of criminal conspiracy? Do you have any idea how ridiculous that sounds?" "I know what I saw," Carolyn Grant insisted, her voice rising with indignation. "This man has been circling our block for 20 minutes, looking at houses, taking notes. Now you and that nurse show up with convenient stories and matching fake IDs. Officer Stone, I demand you arrest all 3 of them for threatening our neighborhood." Mrs. Beatrice Jefferson stepped forward, her blue jacket contrasting sharply with her determined expression. "Young lady, I've been watching this entire situation unfold from my window. Dr. Dunn wasn't taking notes or casing houses. He was looking for parking, just like he said. And I know for a fact he's a doctor because he saved my grandson's life 3 years ago when Marcus had that terrible car accident." Officer Harold Stone turned his attention to Mrs. Beatrice Jefferson, his irritation evident. "Ma'am, I need you to step back and stop interfering with this investigation. You're creating a dangerous situation here." But Mrs. Beatrice Jefferson stood her ground, continuing to record. "The only dangerous situation here is a police officer harassing an innocent man because of his skin color. I'm not interfering. I'm documenting." The tension reached a boiling point as Officer Harold Stone's patience finally snapped. "That's enough. Everyone step back now, or you'll all be charged with obstruction." He reached for his handcuffs, the metallic sound cutting through the afternoon air like a blade. "Dr. Dunn, you're under arrest for suspicious activity and failure to provide adequate identification." "This is insane," Dr. Richard Holloway protested, stepping forward. "You cannot arrest this man. He's done absolutely nothing wrong. I'm calling the mayor's office right now, and I'm calling the hospital's legal department." Nurse Gloria Mensah added, already dialing on her phone. "This is a violation of Dr. Dunn's civil rights." Dr. Elliot Dunn felt the cold metal of the handcuffs clicking around his wrists, the sound echoing through his consciousness like a death knell. After years of saving lives, of being respected for his skill and dedication, he was being arrested for the crime of existing while black in an affluent neighborhood. The humiliation burned deeper than any physical pain he'd ever endured. "Officer Stone, you're making a serious mistake," Dr. Elliot Dunn said quietly, his voice maintaining its professional calm even as rage boiled beneath the surface. "When this is over and the truth comes out, you'll have to live with what you've done here today." Carolyn Grant watched the handcuffs being applied with visible satisfaction. "Finally, some real police work. Officer Stone, I want to personally thank you for protecting our community. We need more officers like you who aren't afraid to do what's necessary." The crowd of neighbors had grown larger, with some clearly disturbed by what they were witnessing. A few tried to speak up in Dr. Elliot Dunn's defense, but Officer Harold Stone's aggressive posture discouraged most intervention. Cell phone cameras continued recording from multiple angles, capturing every moment of the wrongful arrest. Just as Officer Harold Stone was preparing to escort Dr. Elliot Dunn to his patrol car, another vehicle pulled up to the scene. Detective Camille Thornton emerged from an unmarked police sedan, her professional demeanor immediately assessing the volatile situation. She wore a dark blue blazer over a white blouse, her detective's badge clearly visible as she approached the group. "Officer Stone, what's the situation here?" Detective Camille Thornton asked, her experienced eyes taking in the handcuffed Dr. Elliot Dunn, the agitated crowd, and the multiple people recording the encounter. "Detective Thornton, I've arrested this suspect for suspicious activity and failure to provide adequate identification. Multiple witnesses reported him casing the neighborhood," Officer Harold Stone replied, though his voice carried less confidence than it had moments earlier. Detective Camille Thornton's expression grew troubled as she looked at Dr. Elliot Dunn in his medical scrubs, then at Dr. Richard Holloway and Nurse Gloria Mensah in their hospital attire. "Officer Stone, these people are clearly medical professionals. What specific crime are you alleging?" "He was acting suspicious, circling the block, looking at houses," Carolyn Grant interjected before Officer Harold Stone could respond. "I called the police because he doesn't belong in our neighborhood." The words hung in the air like a confession. Detective Camille Thornton's eyes narrowed as she processed the implications of what Carolyn Grant had just admitted. "Ma'am, are you saying you called the police because you didn't think this gentleman belonged in your neighborhood? Based on what criteria?" Carolyn Grant realized too late that she'd revealed her true motivation. "Well, I mean, he was acting suspicious, looking around, driving slowly. You can't be too careful these days." Detective Camille Thornton turned to Mrs. Beatrice Jefferson, who was still recording. "Ma'am, you've been filming this entire incident. What did you observe?" "Detective, I watched this whole thing from the beginning," Mrs. Beatrice Jefferson replied, her voice steady and clear. "Dr. Dunn was simply looking for parking. He wasn't acting suspicious at all. This woman called the police because she saw a black man in her neighborhood and decided he didn't belong here. The brutal honesty of Mrs. Beatrice Jefferson's words cut through all pretense. Detective Camille Thornton examined Dr. Elliot Dunn's hospital identification, then looked at Dr. Richard Holloway's credentials and badge. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Officer Stone, remove those handcuffs immediately, Detective Camille Thornton ordered, her voice carrying the weight of superior authority. Dr. Dunn, you're free to go. I apologize for this incident. Carolyn Grant's face flushed red with indignation. Detective, I demand to speak with someone in charge. This is unacceptable. These people were threatening our neighborhood, and now you're just letting them go? What about our safety? What about our property values? Detective Camille Thornton stared at Carolyn Grant with undisguised disgust. Ma'am, the only threat to this neighborhood's safety is people who make false police reports based on racial prejudice. You've wasted valuable police resources and violated this gentleman's civil rights. As the handcuffs came off, Dr. Elliot Dunn rubbed his wrists where the metal had chafed his skin. The physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional wound of being treated like a criminal in broad daylight, in front of colleagues and strangers alike. Dr. Richard Holloway placed a supportive hand on his shoulder, while Nurse Gloria Mensah shook her head in amazement at what they'd all witnessed. Officer Harold Stone stood silently, realizing that his aggressive approach had been captured on multiple cameras and witnessed by a detective who clearly disapproved of his conduct. The afternoon that had started with such promise for Carolyn Grant's vision of neighborhood security was ending with questions about police misconduct and civil rights violations. Carolyn Grant retreated toward her house, her red blouse bright against the backdrop of her perfect lawn and expensive home. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction despite the detective's intervention. In her mind, she had successfully protected her neighborhood from unwanted elements, and she was certain that her actions would be vindicated once all the facts came to light. As she reached her front door, Carolyn Grant turned back to survey the scene one final time. The black man and his accomplices were finally leaving. The police cars were preparing to depart, and order was being restored to her pristine community. She had no way of knowing that her chronic heart condition, exacerbated by years of stress and rage, was about to remind her that fate has its own sense of justice. 3 hours had passed since the humiliating encounter on Willow Creek Drive. But for Carolyn Grant, those 3 hours felt like a victory lap. She stood in her expansive dining room, adjusting her red cocktail dress in the mirror one final time before her guests arrived. The afternoon sun streamed through her floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a golden glow across the mahogany table she'd spent an hour perfecting. Crystal glasses caught the light, and the scent of her housekeeper's famous roast filled the air. Tonight wasn't just any dinner party. Tonight was a celebration. The doorbell chimed, and Carolyn's face lit up with satisfaction. Her first guests, the Hendersons from 2 streets over, stepped into her marble foyer with warm smiles and expensive wine. Margaret Henderson, resplendent in her signature pearls, immediately complimented the floral arrangements. "Carolyn, darling, you've outdone yourself again," Margaret gushed, air-kissing both cheeks. "Though I must say, there was quite a commotion in the neighborhood earlier. Police cars and everything. What on earth happened?" Carolyn's eyes sparkled with barely contained excitement. This was exactly the opening she'd been hoping for. "Oh, Margaret, you have no idea what I went through today, but I handled it. I protected our community." As more guests filtered in, Carolyn found herself holding court in her living room, the afternoon's events becoming her centerpiece story. She'd already rehearsed it in her mind, polishing each detail to cast herself as the neighborhood's vigilant guardian. "There I was, tending to my roses, when I noticed this man circling our block," she began, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that drew everyone closer. "He was driving this beat-up Honda going around and around, clearly casing our homes. He looked so suspicious, wearing those medical scrubs, probably stolen from some hospital laundry. Robert Grant entered the living room wearing his orange button-down shirt and navy slacks, carrying a tray of appetizers. He'd heard fragments of his wife's story throughout the afternoon, each telling growing more dramatic. Something about the way she described the man bothered him, but he couldn't quite put his finger on what. The man was obviously up to no good, Carolyn continued, accepting a glass of wine from her husband with a dismissive wave. So I did what any responsible citizen would do. I called the police immediately. Margaret Henderson leaned forward, her eyes wide. How frightening. Did they catch him? Oh, they did more than that, Carolyn said, her voice swelling with pride. Officer Stone arrived within minutes. Such a professional, that man. A real hero. He immediately saw what I saw and took control of the situation. Robert noticed his wife's animated gestures, the way she seemed to feed off their guests' attention. What exactly did this man do wrong? He asked quietly. Carolyn shot him a sharp look. Robert, he was casing our neighborhood, looking for houses to rob, cars to steal. Who knows what else? The point is, I stopped him before he could hurt anyone. Meanwhile, across town at Metropolitan General Hospital, Dr. Elliot Dunn sat in the doctor's lounge, still wearing his blue jacket over his scrubs. The fluorescent lights overhead cast everything in stark relief, but he barely noticed. His hands, steady enough to perform the most delicate cardiac procedures, trembled slightly as he held his coffee cup. The afternoon's humiliation played on repeat in his mind. Dr. Richard Holloway knocked on the doorframe before entering. The chief of staff's orange polo shirt was wrinkled from a long day, his usually perfect silver hair slightly disheveled. His face showed the kind of concern that came from genuine care, not mere professional obligation. Elliot, I've been looking for you. How are you holding up? Dr. Dunn looked up, managing a weak smile. I've been better, Richard. 20 years of medical practice, saving lives, building a reputation, and one racist woman with a phone call nearly destroyed everything I've worked for. Nearly being the operative phrase, Dr. Holloway said, settling into the chair across from him. I've already spoken with hospital administration. We're filing formal complaints against Officer Stone. His conduct was completely unacceptable. Will it matter? Dr. Dunn asked, exhaustion evident in his voice. How many complaints have been filed against officers like him? How many actually result in real consequences? Dr. Holloway leaned forward. This one will be different. We have witnesses, video evidence, and the full support of this hospital. Mrs. Jefferson's recording is already making waves with the local media. Your reputation speaks for itself, Elliot. Everyone who knows you knows exactly what kind of man you are. Back in the Grant household, dinner had been served, and Carolyn's story had evolved into a full-blown heroic narrative. She sat at the head of her dining table, gesturing with her wine glass as she described Officer Stone's handling of the situation. He was so thorough, she explained to her captivated audience. Even when this so-called doctor showed some fake ID, Officer Stone wasn't fooled. He could tell immediately that something wasn't right. These criminals are getting more sophisticated, but you can't fool a trained professional. James Morrison, a newer resident of the neighborhood, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Did the man actually do anything illegal? I mean, driving around looking for parking isn't exactly a crime. Carolyn's expression hardened. James, that's exactly the kind of naive thinking that puts our families at risk. This wasn't someone looking for parking. This was a predator studying our routines, our security measures. Thank God I was paying attention. Robert Grant watched his wife's performance with growing unease. Something about her certainty, her absolute conviction that she'd been right, troubled him deeply. What happened to him in the end? Officer Stone detained him properly, Carolyn said with satisfaction. made sure he understood that our neighborhood isn't a place where criminals are welcome. I'm sure he won't be back. The conversation continued through the main course, with Carolyn painting increasingly vivid pictures of the threat she'd neutralized and the heroism she'd displayed. She described Dr. Dunn as everything from a common thief to a potential home invader, each iteration more dramatic than the last. At the hospital, Dr. Dunn had returned to his rounds, throwing himself into patient care as a way to process the day's trauma. The familiar rhythm of medical work, the clarity of diagnosis and treatment, provided a refuge from the chaos of racism and injustice. Here, in these sterile hallways under bright fluorescent lights, his expertise mattered more than the color of his skin. He was reviewing charts when his pager buzzed with an emergency. A cardiac case coming in by ambulance. Severe myocardial infarction. ETA 10 minutes. Dr. Dunn immediately shifted into crisis mode. The afternoon's events pushed aside by the urgent need to save a life. Back at the Grant house, Carolyn was reaching the climax of her story when she suddenly stopped mid-sentence. A sharp pain shot through her chest, causing her to drop her wine glass. The crystal shattered against her marble floor, red wine spreading like blood across the white stone. Carolyn! Robert jumped to his feet, his orange shirt bright under the dining room's chandelier. What's wrong? Carolyn pressed her hand to her chest, her face pale despite her red dress. The pain was unlike anything she'd ever experienced, radiating from her chest down her left arm. I can't breathe properly. The dinner party guests watched in horror as Carolyn Grant, who moments earlier had been the picture of health and vitality, began to collapse. Robert caught her before she could fall completely, lowering her gently to the floor as Margaret Henderson called 911. My chest, Carolyn whispered, her earlier bravado replaced by genuine terror. Something's wrong with my chest. The paramedics arrived within minutes, their professional assessment confirming what the symptoms already suggested. Massive heart attack, critical condition, immediate transport required. As they loaded Carolyn onto the stretcher, Robert grabbed his keys to follow the ambulance. Which hospital? He asked the lead paramedic. Metropolitan General. They have the best cardiac unit in the area. At Metropolitan General, Dr. Dunn had just finished scrubbing in when the emergency case arrived. He pulled on his green surgical scrubs and headed toward the ER, his mind already focused on the procedure ahead. The afternoon's humiliation felt distant now, overshadowed by the immediate need to save a life. The automatic doors burst open as the paramedics wheeled in their patient. Dr. Dunn looked down at the woman on the stretcher and felt time slow to a crawl. Even in her current state, pale and struggling for breath, he recognized her immediately. The red cocktail dress, now rumpled and stained. The perfectly styled blonde hair, now matted with sweat. The face that had looked at him with such disgust and contempt just hours earlier. Carolyn Grant's eyes fluttered open as they moved her from the stretcher to the hospital bed. Through her pain and medication-induced haze, she saw a familiar figure in green scrubs leaning over her. The same dark skin, the same intelligent eyes, the same professional demeanor she'd dismissed as suspicious criminal behavior. No, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Not him. Please, not him. Dr. Dunn heard her words, but maintained his professional composure. He began his examination, checking her vitals, assessing the damage to her heart. Every instinct he'd developed over 20 years of medical practice kicked in, overriding the personal conflict raging in his mind. Robert Grant burst through the ER doors, still wearing his orange button-down shirt, now wrinkled from stress. He looked around frantically until he spotted his wife on the examination table. Standing beside her, methodically working to save her life, was a black doctor in green scrubs, whose face Robert didn't recognize, but whose presence seemed to terrify his wife. "Doctor," Robert called out, approaching the bed. "How is she? What's happening?" Dr. Dunn looked up from his patient, meeting Robert's eyes, with the same calm professionalism he'd maintained throughout the examination. "Your wife has suffered a massive heart attack. She's going to need immediate surgery if we're going to save her life." Carolyn's eyes widened with recognition and terror. The man she'd accused of being a criminal, the man she'd had arrested and humiliated, the man whose credentials she'd dismissed as fake, was now the only person standing between her and death. The cruel irony of the situation crashed over her like a wave, leaving her gasping not just from her failing heart, but from the devastating realization of what her hatred had cost her. Dr. Dunn continued his assessment, his hands steady and sure despite the extraordinary circumstances. In this moment, under the bright hospital lights, there was only one question that mattered. Could he save the life of the woman who had tried to destroy his? The fluorescent lights of Metropolitan General Hospital's emergency room cast their harsh white glow across the chaos of medical urgency. Dr. Elliot Dunn stood at the nurse's station in his blue jacket, exhaustion weighing heavily on his shoulders as he reviewed the latest patient file. Just 3 hours had passed since Officer Harold Stone had humiliated him on the street, handcuffing him like a common criminal, while Carolyn Grant watched with satisfaction. Now the familiar rhythm of hospital life surrounded him, but the sting of injustice still burned in his chest. "Dr. Dunn, we have a cardiac emergency in Trauma Bay 3. Nurse Gloria Mensah called out, her green scrubs bright under the overhead lighting. She approached him with urgent steps, her expression grave. "Massive heart attack. ST elevation MI. The patient is asking for a different doctor." Dr. Elliot Dunn looked up from his charts, his professional instincts immediately taking over despite his emotional fatigue. "What's the patient's condition?" "Critical. We're talking about a widowmaker here. Complete blockage of the left anterior descending artery. She needs emergency surgery within the hour, or she won't make it." Nurse Gloria Mensah paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Dr. Dunn, it's her. It's Carolyn Grant." The name hit him like a physical blow. Dr. Elliot Dunn's hands stilled on the patient file, his mind racing back to the afternoon's confrontation. The woman who had called the police on him, who had accused him of casing houses, who had stood smugly as Officer Harold Stone violated his rights, now lay dying just meters away. "She keeps asking for any doctor but you," Nurse Gloria Mensah continued, her tone carrying a mixture of anger and disbelief. "But Dr. Dunn, you're the only cardiac surgeon available right now. Dr. Martinez is in surgery for another 4 hours, and Dr. Chen is out of town at a conference." Dr. Elliot Dunn closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the Hippocratic oath he had taken years ago. First, do no harm, save lives, treat all patients equally, regardless of their race, religion, or personal animosity toward him. But the image of Carolyn Grant's satisfied face as he was handcuffed flashed through his memory, followed by her voice claiming he didn't belong in her neighborhood. The automatic doors of the emergency room burst open, and Robert Grant rushed in wearing an orange button-down shirt and khakis, his face pale with panic. His gray hair was disheveled, and his hands shook as he approached the reception desk. "My wife, Carolyn Grant. She collapsed at home. The paramedics brought her here. Where is she?" His voice cracked with desperation. Nurse Gloria Mensah exchanged a glance with Dr. Elliot Dunn before approaching Robert Grant. Her green scrubs rustled softly as she moved with practiced compassion. "Mr. Grant, I'm Nurse Mensah. Your wife is in Trauma Bay 3. She's suffered a severe heart attack and needs immediate surgical intervention. Is she going to be okay? What can you do for her?" Robert Grant's questions tumbled out rapidly, his businessman's composure completely shattered. "Sir, we have one of the finest cardiac surgeons on staff available to perform the procedure your wife needs," Nurse Gloria Mensah replied carefully. "Dr. Elliot Dunn has successfully completed over 300 cardiac surgeries with an exceptional success rate." Robert Grant's brow furrowed in confusion. I don't understand. Carolyn mentioned that name earlier today. She said something about calling the police on some suspicious man. The fluorescent lights seemed to flicker as tension filled the space between them. Nurse Gloria Mensah's expression hardened slightly. Mr. Grant, your wife called the police on Dr. Dunn this afternoon while he was looking for parking near your neighborhood. He was arrested and humiliated based on false accusations. Now he's the only surgeon who can save her life. The color drained completely from Robert Grant's face. His legs seemed to buckle slightly, and he gripped the edge of the nurse's station for support. Oh my God! Oh my God, what has she done? From Trauma Bay 3 came a weak but insistent voice. I don't want him touching me. Get me a different doctor. I don't trust him. Dr. Elliot Dunn's jaw tightened, but he maintained his professional composure as he approached the trauma bay. Through the glass partition, he could see Carolyn Grant on the gurney, her red cocktail dress cut open to accommodate the medical equipment. Her face was ashen, her breathing labored, but her eyes held the same defiant hostility he had encountered hours earlier. Dr. Fatima Brennan appeared at his side in green scrubs, her dark hair pulled back in a surgical cap. As one of the hospital's most skilled surgical assistants, she had worked countless procedures with Dr. Elliot Dunn and had witnessed his steady hands save hundreds of lives. Doctor, her cardiac enzymes are through the roof, and the EKG shows massive damage. We're looking at cardiogenic shock if we don't move fast, Dr. Fatima Brennan reported quietly. But she's refusing treatment from you specifically. Dr. Elliot Dunn entered the trauma bay, his blue jacket contrasting sharply with the white walls and bright overhead lighting. Medical monitors beeped frantically around Carolyn Grant's bed, each sound marking another moment stolen from her diminishing chances of survival. Mrs. Grant, I'm Dr. Dunn. You're experiencing a severe heart attack, and you need immediate surgery to restore blood flow to your heart muscle. His voice remained steady and professional, despite the afternoon's injustices burning in his memory. Carolyn Grant's eyes widened with recognition and fear. Her voice came out as barely a whisper, but the venom remained unmistakable. I said, get me someone else. I don't want you anywhere near me. Robert Grant appeared in the doorway, his orange shirt wrinkled from the frantic rush to the hospital. Shame radiated from every line of his body as he approached his wife's bedside. Carolyn, please, this man is trying to save your life. After what I did to protect our neighborhood, he probably wants me dead, Carolyn Grant gasped between labored breaths. Dr. Elliot Dunn stepped closer, his professional training overriding his personal feelings. Mrs. Grant, you have what we call a widowmaker heart attack. The main artery supplying blood to your heart is completely blocked. Without immediate surgical intervention, you have maybe 30 minutes before irreversible damage occurs. The monitors continued their urgent symphony as Dr. Fatima Brennan prepared emergency medications. Her green scrubs moved efficiently between medical equipment as she anticipated Dr. Elliot Dunn's needs. There has to be someone else. Carolyn Grant wheezed desperately. Ma'am, Dr. Dunn is not just your only option right now. He's the best option. Dr. Fatima Brennan interjected firmly. I've assisted in over 200 of his surgeries. His skill and precision are extraordinary. Robert Grant moved closer to his wife's bedside, his face etched with shame and desperation. Carolyn, Nurse Mensah told me what you did today. How could you call the police on an innocent man? How could you accuse him of being suspicious just because he was black? The harsh fluorescent lighting seemed to emphasize every line of guilt on Robert Grant's face as the full scope of his wife's racism became clear. This man is a doctor, Carolyn, a cardiac surgeon trying to save lives, and you tried to have him arrested for looking for parking. Carolyn Grant's breathing became more labored, her skin taking on a grayish pallor that Dr. Elliot Dunn recognized as a sign of failing circulation. The medical equipment around her bed registered her deteriorating condition with increasingly urgent alarms. I need a moment. Dr. Elliot Dunn announced quietly. Stepping back from the trauma bay, he walked to the quieter section of the ER, pulling out his cell phone with hands that trembled slightly. The fluorescent lights overhead cast everything in stark relief as he dialed the number of his mentor, Dr. James Washington, the man who had guided him through medical school and residency. "Dr. Washington, it's Elliot. I need your counsel on something urgent." His mentor's wise voice came through clearly. "What's troubling you, son?" Dr. Elliot Dunn explained the situation quickly, his voice tight with emotion. "The woman who had me arrested this afternoon is now dying of a heart attack, and I'm the only surgeon who can save her. She's refusing treatment from me, but without surgery, she'll be dead within the hour." Silence stretched across the phone connection before Dr. Washington spoke. "Elliot, what does your oath tell you to do? To save lives, regardless of personal feelings. And what does your heart tell you?" Dr. Elliot Dunn leaned against the wall, exhaustion and moral conflict weighing heavily on his shoulders. That maybe she deserves to face the consequences of her hatred. "Son, the measure of a man isn't how he treats those who respect him. It's how he responds to those who have wronged him. Your character isn't defined by her racism. It's defined by your choices in this moment." As Dr. Elliot Dunn ended the call, he saw Dr. Richard Holloway approaching in his orange polo shirt and khakis, the hospital chief's expression grave but supportive. "Elliot, I heard about the situation. I want you to know that whatever decision you make, the hospital administration will support you completely. No one would blame you for recusing yourself after what that woman put you through today." The sound of rapid footsteps echoed through the ER as Nurse Gloria Mensah approached urgently. "Dr. Dunn, her blood pressure is dropping rapidly. We're losing her." Through the glass partition of Trauma Bay 3, Dr. Elliot Dunn could see Carolyn Grant's condition deteriorating rapidly. Robert Grant held his wife's hand, tears streaming down his face as he whispered apologies for her behavior. Dr. Fatima Brennan worked efficiently to stabilize the failing vital signs, but everyone knew that only surgical intervention could save Carolyn Grant's life now. The fluorescent lights seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the medical monitors as Dr. Elliot Dunn faced the most challenging decision of his medical career. In his mind, he could hear Officer Harold Stone's dismissive voice, see Carolyn Grant's satisfied expression as he was handcuffed, feel the burning humiliation of being treated like a criminal in front of his colleagues and neighbors. But he could also hear his mentor's words about character and choices, see the fear in Robert Grant's eyes, and feel the weight of his medical oath pressing against his chest like a physical force. The emergency room continued its controlled chaos around him, but for Dr. Elliot Dunn, everything had narrowed to this single moment of moral reckoning. The woman who had tried to destroy him lay dying, and only he possessed the skill to save her life. Time was running out, and Carolyn Grant's racist heart was failing with each passing second. Dr. Elliot Dunn stood in the hallway outside the operating room, his hands trembling slightly as he stared at the surgical schedule. Carolyn Grant's name glowed on the electronic board like an accusation. 3 hours ago, this woman had tried to destroy his life with lies and racism. Now her life hung in the balance, and he was the only surgeon qualified to save her. Robert Grant approached hesitantly, his orange button-down shirt wrinkled from hours of panic. His eyes were red-rimmed, filled with shame and desperation. "Doctor, I need to ask you something, and I'll understand if you refuse." Dr. Elliot Dunn turned, his green scrubs catching the overhead fluorescent lights. Despite his exhaustion, his voice remained steady and professional. "Mr. Grant, I've already made my decision. Your wife needs emergency cardiac surgery, and I'm going to perform it." Robert's shoulders sagged with relief, but confusion clouded his features. "After what she did to you today, after how she treated you, why would you help her?" Dr. Elliot Dunn looked through the operating room window where nurses were preparing equipment under the bright surgical lights. "Mr. Grant, Saving lives is my calling. It doesn't matter how someone has treated me personally. When I took my oath as a physician, I swore to do no harm and to preserve life above all else. That oath doesn't come with conditions about who deserves treatment. The sincerity in Dr. Elliot Dunn's voice made Robert Grant's shame deepen. I had no idea what kind of person my wife really was until today. Nurse Mensah told me what happened this afternoon. I'm mortified. Dr. Elliot Dunn placed a reassuring hand on Robert's shoulder. Right now, your wife's condition is critical. She has a complete blockage in her left anterior descending artery, what we call the widowmaker. Without immediate surgery, she won't survive the night. I need you to understand that this is a complex procedure with significant risks. As Dr. Elliot Dunn explained the surgical details, his professionalism and compassion shone through every word. Robert Grant found himself wondering how his wife could have looked at this remarkable man and seen only a threat to be eliminated. Inside the pre-op area, Carolyn Grant drifted in and out of consciousness, the powerful medications creating a hazy barrier between her and reality. When she recognized Dr. Elliot Dunn's voice, panic flickered across her pale features. "No," she whispered weakly. "Get someone else. I don't want him touching me." Dr. Elliot Dunn heard her words but maintained his composure. He checked her monitors, noting her blood pressure and heart rhythm with clinical detachment. "Mrs. Grant, I understand you may have concerns, but I'm the only cardiac surgeon available tonight who can perform this procedure. Dr. Brennan and I are going to take excellent care of you." Dr. Fatima Brennan entered wearing fresh green scrubs, her hijab secured under a surgical cap. She had heard about the afternoon's incident and watched Dr. Elliot Dunn with admiration. "Elliot, everything's ready. The OR team is standing by." Nurse Gloria Mensah appeared beside them, her green scrubs pristine under the hospital's bright lighting. She had changed shifts to assist with this surgery, wanting to support her colleague through this emotionally charged procedure. "Dr. Dunn, I've prepared all the instruments you requested. The patient is ready for transport." As they wheeled Carolyn Grant toward the operating room, Dr. Elliot Dunn walked alongside the gurney, checking her vitals one final time. Despite everything she had put him through, his only focus was the complex surgery ahead. This was who he was at his core, a healer who put patient care above personal grievances. Outside the surgical wing, Metropolitan General Hospital buzzed with unusual activity. Word had spread about the afternoon's racist incident and the ironic turn of events. Mrs. Beatrice Jefferson arrived in her familiar blue jacket, moving slowly but with determination. At 82, she had seen enough injustice in her lifetime to recognize something special in Dr. Elliot Dunn's response to this situation. "Excuse me." Mrs. Jefferson approached the reception desk. "I'm here about Dr. Dunn. I witnessed what happened this afternoon, and I wanted to offer my support." The receptionist, a young woman with kind eyes, smiled warmly. "Mrs. Jefferson, Dr. Dunn is currently in surgery. Would you like to wait in the family area?" Mrs. Jefferson settled into a chair near the surgical waiting room, her blue jacket folded neatly in her lap. Other community members began arriving, word spreading through social media and phone calls about Dr. Elliot Dunn's remarkable character. They came to show support for a man who had chosen compassion over revenge. News reporter Michelle Harrington arrived with her camera crew, the bright lights illuminating the hospital corridor. She had been following the story since Mrs. Jefferson's video started circulating online. The contrast between the afternoon's injustice and the evening's medical emergency created a powerful narrative about character and redemption. "This is Michelle Harrington reporting from Metropolitan General Hospital," she began, her red blazer professional under the camera lights. "Earlier today, Dr. Elliot Dunn was wrongfully detained and humiliated by police after a racist woman called authorities, claiming he was suspicious. Tonight, that same woman's life depends on Dr. Dunn's skill as he performs emergency heart surgery." Michelle interviewed Mrs. Jefferson, whose blue jacket and dignified bearing made her a compelling witness. "I've lived in this community for 60 years, Mrs. Jefferson explained, her voice clear despite her age. "I've seen good people and bad people, but I've rarely seen someone with Dr. Dunn's character. After what that woman put him through today, he still chose to save her life. That tells you everything about the kind of man he is." Inside the operating room, Dr. Elliot Dunn focused entirely on the surgery. The overhead lights created perfect visibility as he made precise incisions, his hands steady despite the emotional turmoil of the day. Dr. Fatima Brennan assisted skillfully, anticipating his needs as they worked to repair Carolyn Grant's damaged heart. "Bypass graft is looking good," Dr. Brennan observed, monitoring the patient's vital signs on multiple screens. "Her pressure is stabilizing." Nurse Gloria Mensah handed Dr. Elliot Dunn instruments with practiced efficiency, their teamwork seamless after years of collaboration. She watched him work with renewed admiration, seeing not just his technical skill, but his unwavering commitment to his oath as a physician. "How's the flow through the new vessel?" Dr. Elliot Dunn asked, his concentration absolute as he sutured delicate cardiac tissue. "Excellent," Dr. Brennan replied. "You've restored complete circulation to the affected area." Outside the hospital, Detective Camille Thornton reviewed Mrs. Jefferson's video footage on her tablet, building her case against Officer Harold Stone. The bright screen illuminated her focused expression as she documented each instance of misconduct and abuse of authority. "This is clear evidence of racial profiling and violation of civil rights," Detective Thornton told her partner. Officer Stone ignored multiple witnesses and professional identification. He escalated a non-situation into wrongful detention based solely on racial bias. Attorney Samuel Nakamura arrived at the hospital in his dark suit, carrying a briefcase filled with legal documents. Word of the incident had reached the local ACLU chapter, and they were prepared to pursue federal civil rights charges. He approached the information desk, asking to speak with Dr. Dunn's family or representatives. Mrs. Jefferson overheard and introduced herself. "I'm the one who recorded the whole thing," she explained, her blue jacket giving her an air of dignified authority. "That young doctor was treated shamefully, and Officer Stone needs to face consequences." Samuel Nakamura sat beside Mrs. Jefferson, reviewing her video evidence on his phone. The quality was excellent, capturing not only Officer Stone's actions, but also Dr. Elliot Dunn's calm professionalism under extreme pressure. "This is exactly what we need to prove systematic misconduct," he said. "Dr. Dunn has grounds for a significant civil rights lawsuit." As the surgery entered its 4th hour, Dr. Elliot Dunn worked with unwavering focus, replacing damaged vessels and restoring blood flow to Carolyn Grant's heart. His skill was evident in every precise movement, every careful suture. This was why he had spent years in medical school and residency, why he had dedicated his life to healing. "Final bypass is complete," Dr. Elliot Dunn announced, stepping back to assess his work. "Let's check the flow rates one more time before we close." Dr. Fatima Brennan monitored the cardiac output readings, her expression brightening as the numbers improved. "Perfect circulation restored. Her heart function is returning to normal parameters." In the waiting room, Robert Grant paced anxiously, processing everything he had learned about his wife's behavior. The community members who had gathered to support Dr. Elliot Dunn watched him with a mixture of sympathy and judgment. He was married to a woman whose racism had been exposed for the world to see. Michelle Harrington continued her reporting, interviewing arriving community members about the afternoon's events. Each person she spoke to praised Dr. Elliot Dunn's character and condemned the treatment he had received. The story was gaining national attention, becoming a symbol of racial injustice and professional integrity. "The irony here is profound," Michelle told her viewers, her red blazer bright under the camera lights. "A woman who called police on a black doctor, claiming he was dangerous, now owes her life to that same doctor's skill and compassion." As Dr. Elliot Dunn began closing the surgical incisions, Nurse Gloria Mensah prepared post-operative care instructions. They had worked together through countless surgeries, but tonight felt different. Tonight, they had witnessed something extraordinary about the power of choosing principle over personal feelings. "She's going to make a full recovery," Dr. Elliot Dunn told his team, finally allowing himself a moment of satisfaction. Despite everything Carolyn Grant had put him through, he had saved her life with the same dedication he brought to every patient. The surgery was complete, but Dr. Elliot Dunn knew the real test was just beginning. Soon Carolyn Grant would wake up to face the reality of what had happened. She would have to confront her own racism and acknowledge that the man she had tried to destroy had chosen to save her life instead. The fluorescent lights of the recovery room cast their sterile glow across the white walls as Carolyn Grant's eyelids fluttered open. The steady beeping of monitors filled the silence, each rhythmic pulse a reminder of her second chance at life. Her throat felt dry, her chest tender, and confusion clouded her thoughts as she tried to remember how she'd ended up here. "Mrs. Grant, can you hear me?" The voice was calm, professional, and achingly familiar. Carolyn's vision cleared slowly, bringing into focus the man standing beside her bed. Dr. Elliot Dunn wore his blue jacket over green scrubs, a stethoscope draped around his neck. His dark eyes showed no malice, no anger, only the focused attention of a physician caring for his patient. The same eyes she had dismissed with such contempt just hours before. The memory hit her like a physical blow. The police call, the accusations, the handcuffs. This was the man she had branded a criminal, the man she had tried to have arrested for the crime of existing in her neighborhood. And now he stood here, checking her pulse with gentle fingers, the very hands that had just saved her life. "The surgery went well," Dr. Elliot Dunn continued, his voice betraying nothing of their shared history. "We were able to clear the blockages in your arteries and restore blood flow to your heart. You're going to recover fully, but it will take time." Carolyn tried to speak, but only a whisper emerged. You operated on me?" "I did." Dr. Elliot Dunn adjusted her IV drip with practiced efficiency. The procedure took 4 hours. Dr. Brennan assisted, along with an excellent surgical team. "Your heart is strong, Mrs. Grant. You should make a complete recovery with proper care." Tears began streaming down Carolyn's cheeks, but they weren't tears of gratitude. They were tears of shame so deep they seemed to come from her very soul. This man, this brilliant surgeon whom she had tried to destroy, had spent 4 hours fighting to save her life. While she had been unconscious and vulnerable, he had been her guardian angel. "Why?" she whispered, the word barely audible. Dr. Elliot Dunn paused in his examination, meeting her eyes directly for the first time since she'd awakened. "Because it's what I do, Mrs. Grant. I'm a doctor. I took an oath to preserve life, regardless of the circumstances." The door opened with a soft whoosh, and Robert Grant rushed in, still wearing his orange button-down shirt from the dinner party that felt like a lifetime ago. His face was etched with worry and something else, something darker that Carolyn couldn't quite identify. "Honey, thank God you're awake." Robert moved to her bedside, but his greeting lacked warmth. "Dr. Dunn has been taking excellent care of you, Mr. Grant." Dr. Elliot Dunn nodded professionally. "I'll give you some privacy to talk with your wife. I'll be back to check on her progress in an hour." As Dr. Elliot Dunn moved toward the door, Robert called out, "Doctor, wait." He turned to face the man who had saved his wife's life. "I need you to know how sorry I am. What Carolyn did today, what she said, it was inexcusable, and you saved her anyway. I don't know how to thank you." Dr. Elliot Dunn paused at the threshold. "Your wife is my patient now, Mr. Grant. That's all that matters." When they were alone, Robert pulled a chair close to Carolyn's bed, but his expression was anything but loving. "Do you understand what happened today, Carolyn? Do you have any idea what you did?" "Robert, No, let me finish." His voice was firm, controlled. but she could hear the anger underneath. "I spoke with the nurses. I know about this afternoon. I know you called the police on Dr. Dunn. I know you accused him of being a criminal when he was just looking for a parking space after working a double shift saving lives." Carolyn closed her eyes, unable to face the disappointment in her husband's voice. "This man," Robert continued, "this brilliant cardiac surgeon you tried to have arrested for being black in our neighborhood, just spent 4 hours cutting open your chest and repairing your heart with his bare hands. He could have walked away. Any other doctor would have been justified in recusing themselves. But he didn't. He saved you. I didn't know." "You didn't know what? That he was a doctor? You saw his hospital ID. You heard him explain himself. But that didn't matter to you, did it? All you saw was a black man, and you decided he didn't belong." The harsh fluorescent lights seemed to grow brighter as Robert's words cut through her defenses. Carolyn had spent years telling herself she wasn't racist, that she was simply concerned about property values and neighborhood safety. But faced with the undeniable truth of her actions, those lies crumbled. Meanwhile, 3 floors below in the hospital's media room, news reporter Michelle Harrington faced a bank of cameras, her red blazer and black slacks crisp under the bright studio lights. Behind her, a split screen showed 2 contrasting images: Dr. Elliot Dunn in handcuffs that afternoon, and the same man in surgical scrubs walking into an operating room. This is Michelle Harrington, reporting from Metropolitan General Hospital, where an extraordinary story of courage and compassion has captured national attention. She began. "Earlier today, Dr. Juan Elliot Dunn, a respected cardiac surgeon, was wrongfully detained and humiliated after a racist caller reported him as suspicious for simply looking for parking in her neighborhood. Tonight, that same caller is alive because Dr. Dunn chose to save her life." The story was spreading across social media like wildfire. Mrs. Beatrice Jefferson's cell phone video, showing the complete encounter between Dr. Elliot Dunn and Officer Harold Stone, had been shared hundreds of thousands of times. The hashtag Dr. Dunn Hero was trending nationwide, along with calls for justice and police reform. In the police department's internal affairs office, Detective Camille Thornton sat across from Officer Harold Stone in her crisp white blouse and black pants. The overhead lights revealed the sweat on Stone's forehead as she played back his body camera footage for the 3rd time. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Officer Stone," Detective Thornton said, her voice cold and professional. "Dr. Dunn showed you his hospital identification, which you dismissed as fake. He calmly explained his presence in the neighborhood, which you ignored. Multiple witnesses vouched for his character and profession, which you disregarded. At what point did you believe you had probable cause for detention?" Stone shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his short-sleeved uniform now wrinkled and stained with perspiration. "The caller said he was acting suspicious. I was responding to a complaint." "The caller," Detective Thornton consulted her notes, "who is now alive thanks to the man you handcuffed and humiliated. The same man whose medical expertise she desperately needed just hours after trying to destroy his reputation." She leaned forward, her eyes boring into Stone's. "We have video evidence of you using racial slurs. We have witness testimony of excessive force and abuse of authority. We have documentation of you ignoring clear evidence of Dr. Dunn's identity and legitimate presence in the area." The body camera footage played again, showing Officer Stone's aggressive escalation despite Dr. Elliot Dunn's calm cooperation. Every racist assumption, every ignored piece of evidence, every violation of proper procedure was captured in damning detail. "You're suspended pending a full investigation," Detective Thornton announced. "Federal civil rights investigators are already reviewing this case. I suggest you contact a lawyer." Back in the recovery room, Dr. Richard Holloway entered wearing his orange polo shirt and khakis, his face grave but determined. As chief of staff, he had called an emergency press conference to address the situation. "Mrs. Grant, He nodded politely before turning to Robert. "Mr. Grant, I wanted to personally assure you both that Dr. Dunn received no pressure from administration to perform your wife's surgery. His decision was entirely his own, motivated purely by his commitment to his patients and his profession." Dr. Holloway's voice carried the weight of authority as he continued. "I also want you to know that this hospital stands firmly behind Dr. Dunn. What happened to him today was an unconscionable violation of his civil rights and an assault on human dignity. We are cooperating fully with all investigations into this matter." Carolyn listened in silence, each word adding to the crushing weight of her guilt. The magnitude of what she had done was becoming clear, not just to her, but to the entire world. Social media was ablaze with condemnation of her actions and praise for Dr. Elliot Dunn's character. "The irony," Dr. Holloway added, "is that Dr. Dunn was looking for parking near his friend's house so he could attend a community meeting about improving police-community relations. He's been volunteering his time to build bridges between our hospital and underserved neighborhoods." Robert looked at his wife with undisguised disgust. "So while you were calling him a criminal, he was actually trying to help the community." When Dr. Elliot Dunn returned for his hourly check, Carolyn found her voice. "Doctor, I need to tell you something." He approached her bed with the same professional demeanor, checking her monitors and noting her improved vitals. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Grant? Any chest pain or difficulty breathing?" "No, that's not what I mean." She struggled to sit up straighter, wincing at the pain from her incisions. "I need to apologize. I need you to know that what I did today was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong." Dr. Elliot Dunn paused in his examination, his expression neutral. "Mrs. Grant, you need to focus on your recovery right now. Please," she whispered, tears flowing freely now. "I called the police on you for no reason except the color of your skin. I tried to have you arrested. I humiliated you in front of your colleagues and our neighbors, and then you saved my life anyway. I don't understand how you could do that." For the first time since her awakening, Dr. Elliot Dunn's professional mask slipped slightly. "Because that's who I am, Mrs. Grant. Not who you assumed I was, but who I actually am. I'm a doctor who saves lives. That's my identity, not my skin color." "I know that now," she sobbed. "I know that, and I'm so sorry. I'm so deeply, terribly sorry." Dr. Elliot Dunn was quiet for a long moment, considering her words. "Mrs. Grant, your apology is a start, but apologies without action are just words. The question is what you're going to do with this second chance you've been given." Outside her room, the story continued to unfold across the nation's screens. The contrast between Carolyn's racist assumptions and Dr. Elliot Dunn's life-saving actions had struck a nerve with millions of Americans. It was a perfect encapsulation of the prejudice that Black professionals face daily and the grace with which many chose to respond. As Dr. Elliot Dunn left the recovery room, Carolyn Grant stared at the ceiling, finally understanding the full weight of her actions. She had tried to destroy an innocent man and instead had revealed the depths of her own prejudice to the world. Now she lay alive because of his skill and compassion, forced to confront the ugly truth about herself. The road to redemption, she realized, would be long and difficult, but it was a road she would have to travel if she wanted to deserve the gift of life she had been given. 3 weeks after the surgery that saved her life, the wheels of justice finally began to turn with the weight they deserved. In the federal courthouse downtown, Detective Camille Thornton stood before a packed courtroom, her evidence files thick with documentation that would end Officer Harold Stone's career forever. "The defendant's pattern of misconduct spans 18 months, Detective Thornton announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent countless hours building an airtight case. Body camera footage, witness testimony, and documented complaints reveal systematic civil rights violations that cannot be ignored." Officer Harold Stone sat at the defendant's table in his civilian clothes, the same uniform he had worn with such arrogance now stripped away permanently. His lawyer shuffled through papers with the defeated air of someone fighting an unwinnable battle. The evidence was overwhelming. Mrs. Beatrice Jefferson's viral video had been just the beginning. Once Detective Thornton started digging, she found a trail of misconduct that stretched back years. Judge Patricia Reeves, a stern woman with silver hair and no patience for injustice, reviewed the federal charges with the gravity they deserved. Officer Stone, you have been found guilty of violating Section 242 of Title 18, deprivation of rights under color of law. You are hereby sentenced to 2 years in federal prison and permanently barred from law enforcement. The courtroom erupted in applause. Mrs. Beatrice Jefferson, wearing her signature blue jacket, wiped tears of satisfaction from her eyes. Justice had not been swift, but it had finally arrived. Across town, at Metropolitan General Hospital, Carolyn Grant sat in her bed wearing a red hospital gown, her recovery progressing steadily under the care of the man whose life she had tried to destroy. The irony was not lost on her, and for the first time in her privileged existence, she was truly confronting the ugliness of her actions. Dr. Elliot Dunn entered her room for what would be their final consultation, wearing his blue jacket over green scrubs. His professionalism remained impeccable, but Carolyn could see the weight of everything they had both endured in his eyes. "Your heart is healing perfectly," Dr. Dunn said, checking her chart with the same meticulous care he showed every patient. "You'll be discharged tomorrow." Carolyn Grant took a shaky breath, knowing this was her only chance to say what needed to be said. "Dr. Dunn, I need to apologize to you properly, not just privately but publicly. What I did was inexcusable." Dr. Dunn paused his chart review, studying her face for signs of genuine remorse. What he saw there was something he had not expected to find: real shame, and perhaps the beginning of understanding. "Mrs. Grant, your apology matters, but it's not enough," he said with quiet intensity. "This isn't just about you and me. This is about every Black professional who gets questioned, doubted, and humiliated simply for existing in spaces where people like you think we don't belong." Carolyn Grant nodded, tears flowing freely now. "I know. I want to do more than apologize. I want to do something meaningful." That afternoon, news reporter Michelle Harrington gathered with cameras outside the hospital as Carolyn Grant, supported by a walker but determined to speak, addressed the media and the community she had wronged. "3 weeks ago, I made a racist 9/11 call that led to the wrongful detention of Dr. Elliot Dunn," she began, her voice shaking but clear. "I let my prejudice and privilege blind me to the character and humanity of an exceptional man who would later save my life. I was wrong, completely, inexcusably wrong." The crowd that had gathered was a mix of community members, hospital staff, and civil rights activists. Some faces showed skepticism, others cautious hope. Mrs. Beatrice Jefferson stood near the front, her blue jacket a reminder of the courage it had taken to document the truth. "Dr. Dunn showed me what true character looks like," Carolyn continued. "When given every reason to walk away, he chose to save my life because that's who he is. I spent 52 years thinking I was a good person while harboring the kind of racism that nearly destroyed an innocent man. I can't undo what I did, but I can spend whatever time I have left fighting the system that made my behavior possible." Dr. Elliot Dunn, who had been watching from the hospital entrance, stepped forward. His green scrubs caught the afternoon sunlight, and his presence commanded the attention of everyone present. "Mrs. Grant's apology is a start," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "But real change requires more than individual accountability. It requires systemic transformation in how we train our police, how we address implicit bias, and how we create consequences for racist behavior." Attorney Samuel Nakamura, a sharp-dressed man who had worked tirelessly on Dr. Dunn's behalf, stepped up to the microphone next. His briefcase was filled with documents that represented months of legal advocacy. "Today we announce a landmark settlement with the city," Attorney Nakamura declared. $2 million in damages for Dr. Dunn, but more importantly, mandatory bias training for all police officers, civilian oversight of misconduct investigations, and policy changes that will protect other innocent citizens from experiencing what Dr. Dunn endured. The crowd's approval was thunderous. This was not just about money. It was about creating systemic change that would outlast any individual case. But the day's revelations were far from over. Inside the hospital, Dr. Richard Holloway, the hospital chief, gathered the medical staff in the main conference room. Wearing his orange polo shirt and carrying himself with the authority of someone making a historic decision, he prepared to announce something that would cap off this remarkable day. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Holloway began, his voice filled with pride and determination, "it is my honor to announce that Dr. Elliot Dunn has been promoted to head of cardiac surgery, effective immediately. His skill, character, and grace under unimaginable pressure make him not just the right choice, but the only choice for this position." Nurse Gloria Mensa, wearing her green scrubs and beaming with pride for her colleague, led the standing ovation that followed. Dr. Fatima Brennan, who had assisted in Carolyn Grant's surgery, wiped tears from her eyes as she applauded the recognition that was long overdue. Dr. Elliot Dunn stood at the front of the room, overwhelmed by the support of his colleagues, but focused on the responsibility that lay ahead. "This promotion is not just about me," he said, his voice steady with purpose. "It's about proving that excellence and character matter more than the color of our skin. It's about opening doors for the next generation of Black doctors who deserve to be judged by their skills and dedication, not by prejudiced assumptions." Meanwhile, across town, Robert Grant sat in his lawyer's office, signing divorce papers that would end his 20-year marriage to Carolyn. The man who had once enabled his wife's behavior through silence had finally found his moral compass, though it had cost him everything he thought he knew about his life. "I can't be married to someone who would do what she did," Robert told his attorney, his orange button-down shirt wrinkled from sleepless nights of moral reckoning. "Maybe she can change, maybe she can't. But I can't be part of that journey anymore." The community ceremony, held the following weekend, drew hundreds of people to the city park. Mrs. Beatrice Jefferson, now recognized as a civil rights hero for her crucial video documentation, addressed the crowd with the wisdom of someone who had witnessed decades of struggle and small victories. "Dr. Elliot Dunn could have become bitter," she said, her blue jacket catching the breeze as she spoke from the podium. "He could have let injustice turn his heart cold. Instead, he showed us that dignity and professionalism can be more powerful than hatred and prejudice. He saved the life of someone who tried to destroy him, and in doing so, he saved all of us by showing us what true character looks like." News reporter Michelle Harrington covered every moment of the ceremony for national television, understanding that this story had implications far beyond one community. Her cameras captured the diverse crowd, the emotion in people's faces, and the hope that real change might be possible. "This is what accountability looks like," she reported, standing near the ceremony's main stage. Officer Harold Stone in prison, systemic police reforms implemented, and a Black professional not just vindicated, but elevated to the position his skills always merited. It's a reminder that sometimes, just sometimes, the system can work when people of conscience refuse to stay silent. As the sun set on the ceremony, Dr. Elliot Dunn returned to Metropolitan General Hospital for his evening rounds. Now wearing the green scrubs that marked him as head of cardiac surgery, he walked the halls with quiet satisfaction. Not satisfaction from revenge, but from the knowledge that his dignity under pressure had created ripple effects that would protect countless others. In her apartment across town, Carolyn Grant, now alone but committed to rebuilding her understanding of the world, prepared for her first day of community service with the local NAACP chapter. Her red blouse felt different now, less like armor and more like a reminder of the person she was trying to stop being. The operating room called, and Dr. Elliot Dunn scrubbed in for another life-saving surgery. As he had 3 weeks ago, he would pour all of his skill and dedication into preserving human life, regardless of who lay on that table. That was who he was. That was who he had always been. Excellence and character had triumphed over prejudice, but the victory was not just his alone. It belonged to everyone who had stood with truth when lies were easier, who had documented injustice when silence was safer, and who had believed that one person's dignity was worth fighting for. The system had bent toward justice, but only because good people had refused to let it break. You just heard a story that history tried to overlook. If it stayed with you, take a second to stand with it. Subscribe, share, and help us keep telling the stories that deserve light, not silence.